Look at a map of our world today. What do you see? A patchwork of colors. Lines drawn across continents. Invisible fences that separate countries, cultures, and peoples. For all of human history, these lines, these borders, have defined us. They've shaped our identities, sparked our conflicts, and determined our destinies. But what if they never existed? Imagine a world, not of 195 nations, but of a single human civilization. A world with no passports, no visas, no checkpoints. No walls, no fences, no barriers to entry. A world where everyone is a citizen of one planet. This isn't a sci-fi utopia or a distant fantasy. It's a profound thought experiment, a deep dive into the kind of world that might have emerged if humanity had never drawn a single line in the sand. What if borders never existed? The consequences would be monumental, rippling through every aspect of human existence. From the way we live and work to the very nature of our identity, this is a story of a different human journey. A journey of one world, one people. To understand a world without borders, we have to start at the beginning. The very idea of a border is a relatively modern concept. For most of our history, humanity was tribal, nomadic, or part of vast, loosely defined empires. The modern nation-state, with its rigid, fixed boundaries, is a product of political evolution, warfare, and treaties. In our alternate timeline, a different path is taken. Perhaps a global pandemic in the distant past forced humanity to unify against a common enemy. Or maybe an ancient, technologically advanced society laid the foundation for a single world government, a united Earth, thousands of years before the modern era. For the purpose of this story, let's assume that from the moment humanity spread across the globe, we saw ourselves not as separate nations, but as a single species. The initial migrations were not for conquest or settlement of foreign lands, but simply a spread of humanity across a shared home. Without the drive to protect national interests, there would be no reason for empires to clash over territory. The Punic Wars, the Napoleonic Wars, World War I and II, the very conflicts that shaped our history, would be fundamentally different, if they happened at all. There would be no scramble for Africa, no colonial powers dividing continents like a pie chart. The wealth and resources of the planet would be seen as a collective trust, managed for the benefit of all humanity, not just a select few. The most significant historical shift would be the absence of nationalistic fervor, the idea that my country is better than your country. Without that tribal loyalty on a global scale, the primary drivers of conflict would have been eliminated. Without borders, the global economy would be a beast we can barely comprehend. The very concept of a developed and developing world would cease to exist. There would be no tariffs, no trade wars, no import taxes. Goods and services would flow freely to wherever they were most needed, leading to an efficiency we can only dream of. But this isn't all positive. The massive, uncontrolled flow of labor would have dramatic effects. If a plumber in a low-cost region could simply move to a high-cost one for a higher salary, this would create an instant and massive redistribution of wealth. The result could be a flattening of global economies, where living standards become more uniform across the world. The richest areas would see a drop in wages as they are flooded with labor, while poorer regions would see wages rise as the supply of workers thins out. This could lead to a new kind of social friction, not between nations, but within a single society. We might see a rise in resentment from those who feel their livelihoods are being threatened by mass migration. But with no borders to close, this social tension would have to be resolved through different means, not through exclusion, but through integration. Perhaps global social safety nets would be created to ensure no one is left behind, or maybe a global universal basic income would become the norm. The world's immense wealth, which is currently hoarded by a handful of nations and corporations, would have to be shared in a way that benefits everyone. This is where the idea of a borderless world gets truly complex. Language, for example, would have a single, unified trajectory. With constant communication and migration, a single global language would emerge, likely a mix of the most dominant languages in the early days. A global dialect would become the norm, with regional variations eventually fading away. This would make communication effortless, ending translation barriers and fostering a deep sense of connection. But what do we lose in the process? Without borders to protect and preserve unique cultural identities, the diversity of human expression could be at risk. Would there be a distinction between Italian opera and Japanese kabuki? Would regional traditions, festivals, and folk tales be absorbed into a bland, global monoculture? The vibrant mosaic of human culture that we know today would be replaced by a single, global tapestry. We might lose the rich tapestry of human history, the unique dances, the diverse cuisines, and the ancient languages that have been passed down for generations. The very concept of heritage would have to be redefined. And what about religion? Without national identities and the conflicts they breed, would religion still exist in the same way? The Crusades, the 30 Years' War, the rise of radicalism, these conflicts were often fueled by a potent mix of religion and national pride. In a world without nations, faith might still exist, but it would be a personal, spiritual journey, not a banner to be carried into battle. We might see a world of deeply spiritual people, but without the sectarian violence that has plagued our history. Without borders, the concept of a capital city or a world leader would become obsolete. Power would be decentralized. Instead of competing nations, we would see the rise of powerful, self-sufficient city-states or megalopolises. Think of Tokyo, New York, or London, but with an even greater degree of autonomy and global influence. These city-states would become the new centers of commerce, innovation, and culture. They might compete for talent and resources, but the conflicts would be economic and social, not military. The primary function of a world government would be to manage global resources and challenges. Things like climate change, pandemics, and space exploration would be tackled with a unified, species-wide effort. There would be no political gridlock, no nationalistic bickering over climate treaties or pandemic responses. The sheer scale of human cooperation would be breathtaking. Humanity would be able to pool its collective resources, knowledge, and talent to solve problems that currently seem insurmountable. But who would be in charge? A global government could easily become a monolithic and tyrannical force, with no outside power to check its authority. The very lack of competing nations could lead to a kind of soft totalitarianism, where dissent is not suppressed by force, but simply made irrelevant. With no other nation to flee to, and no competing ideology to embrace, where would humanity find its freedom? The only way for such a system to work would be for it to be a true, bottom-up democracy, where every human on Earth has a voice. This brings us to the ultimate question. If humanity were to become a single, unified species, what would be our purpose? Without the drive of national competition, where would we find our motivation? The space race, for example, was a product of the Cold War. The race to the moon was a geopolitical flex, a way for the United States to show its superiority over the Soviet Union. Without that rivalry, would we have ever landed on the moon? In a world without borders, our collective goal would be to explore and conquer. Not other nations, but the stars themselves. The resources and focus of a unified humanity could be poured into interstellar travel, terraforming other planets, and searching for life beyond our solar system. The first human to land on Mars wouldn't be an American or a Russian, they would be a citizen of Earth. The human story would no longer be about borders and flags, but about our place in the cosmos. Our greatest conflicts would not be with each other, but with the vast, uncaring universe. So, in the end, what if borders never existed? We would lose the things that make us unique, our distinct cultures, our ancient languages, and the rich history of our national identities. But we would gain something far greater, a shared purpose, a unified identity, and the ability to solve the great challenges of our time. We would no longer be a collection of tribes fighting over a small patch of land, but a single species, united and bound for the stars. The world would be a more peaceful, more efficient, and perhaps, more meaningful place. It would be the story of humanity's evolution from a species of tribes into a species of one. The what-ifs are endless. We've explored a world without borders, but what about the invisible lines we draw in our own lives? What's the first thing you think would change if our world had no borders? Do you think the benefits would outweigh the loss of our distinct cultures? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to keep exploring how our world could be different, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Timeline Shift, and get ready for our next adventure.